Gospel.
Joining us on Premiere is the founder of Impact X Capital Partners and also the host of the massive TV show on Channel 4, Eric Collins. Thank you so much for joining us, Eric.
Thank you for letting me come and talk to your audience. It's good being here.
Now, we're talking really because of the TV show that you have, and I've come late to the party because I think next week is the final episode, final of the 4 series of 60-minute programs. But before we talk about that, let me dial back a little. Here you are, founder of a company, I think over 100 million in assets you hold. You grew up in the North Carolina area, Tuskegee man yourself. You can claim definitely Princeton man, Harvard man, Barack Obama's friend, and all these things. But also you are a member of the Cathedral, Southwark Cathedral. Tell us, please, your journey of faith, because of course, when most people are talking to you on the platforms you're on around the world, we're talking to you about money. We're talking to you about, can I get some money for my business? So I wanted to find out your journey of faith. Where did it start?
Look, it's fascinating also that because money where I'm from is in church is never undiscussable. It is something which is very much a part of what makes an institution an institution. And the resources that come through you, which are given sometimes through offering, sometimes through tithing, to that institution in order for its programs to run, whether it be for the homeless ministry or whether it be for the music ministry, it's all part of, or the building fund. It's just all part of what it is to be a mature member of faith in a Christian community around an institution, which is often part of a thing which is immortalized and compacted in a building, which is called church to me. So my life has been from the very beginning a church life. I said to somebody the other day, it's like if it's Sunday and I'm not in church, it would mean something's wrong. It's a bit of, and it's not just a question of a habit. It is also a question of a mindset. I find church to be a place where, I'm on, I have the privilege of being on a number of television and radio interview programs, and to actually hear my voice a lot. But I like to hear other people's voices. I like to hear other people's thoughts. I'd like to be able to be taken down to the spaces where I'm hearing the small, still voice, which I can hear that small, still voice, and from that small, still voice, be able to then move forward. So for me, church has always been. My father was, when I was growing up, he was always the superintendent of Sunday school. So we were Sunday school people as well as church people. Mom was a church musician. So, very talented church musician working with young people, and then also like to do big things. So if you ever needed a handbell choir, plus a drum line, plus you need an orchestra, plus you need to be singing the Hallelujah chorus, Ma could put that together for you and make it all happen beautifully. And so we grew up, in church on Sunday. We would be in church probably on Saturday because there would be the young people's activities, whether it be the acting group or the dance group. And then we'd be in church on Wednesday for a choir rehearsal because you had to perform on Sunday. So I've always been in a church community. And when we first moved here to London, the question was, what church community shall we join? And we joined, our neighborhood is near Southwark Cathedral. And the church, based on all the work that it does, based on the family that it puts together, all sorts of people from the African diaspora who are from, whether they be from Sierra Leone or whether they be from South Africa or Zimbabwe, or whether they be from Cameroon, the people who come there and worship makes this place a very special place.
I have to confess to you, when I knew I was speaking to you, and because I was so backed up and I'm trying to prep, so I thought, man, shall I take a shortcut and just call my friend Bishop Chris and ask all about this, all about this young man? But then I'm calling him and like, where is he? He was probably
He's in
in Israel. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was. I thought he's probably in Israel, you know. But here we are. Your TV show, The Moneymaker. As I said, that's why we're talking. And I wish we had time to talk to you about a variety of things. I wish we could talk about the Black Lives Matter issue, or talk about your journey through the Tuskegee and the history of that. But we're talking really The Moneymaker. We're talking TV show. We're talking a Christian man, the first man of color that I know that has a show like that on mainstream TV. What part did your Christian faith play in uh, you creating this show, and how you have engaged with the people you have dealt with, the opportunities you've seen, the opportunities you want to give? What part does your Christian faith play in that?
This is a fascinating interview. This is fantastic because I don't think that people truly appreciate, but this audience will, that the manner in which you are, the sort of centering that you have in your life determines how you then interact with others. It determines how you measure success and whether or not you are going to be a tool for good or a tool for some other purpose. So for me, the moneymaker is the continuation of my purpose in life. My purpose seems to be in the journey is to make sure that I am working with people to create opportunities, not just for themselves, but for whole communities to empower them, to make them stronger, to make them have, to make them sort of have not only as an outcome, but as a byproduct, all sorts of things which materiality makes possible. So, for instance, my the reason that I am working at Impact X is because we believe that if indeed we built companies that look like Amazon, or if we built companies that look like Spotify and they were started by Black men and women, that those organizations would hire differently, they would promote differently, they would actually look very different and be much more reflective of the world that I wish to see. And that based on doing that, those sorts of people who are very highly compensated would then also have resources that would then be able to be put to work within communities, whether it be philanthropically, whether it be for church purposes, whether it be to buy a house, or whether it be to invest in other companies and seed the next generation.
Now, Eric, I know you were moving to answer my question, but
Yeah.
just on that point of what the focus of Impact X is, because I know that you and your team, you focus on people, businessmen and businesswomen of color. Uh, have you ever come up against the question, why is it that you focus on that? I mean, why don't you focus on other ethnicities? Then other ethnicities need the input, don't they? Why have you kept your money for that little corridor?
You know, it's a good question. The reason we focus on people of color and women generally is because that's a place where there's an inefficiency in the market. And if you want to make an outsized return, and with venture capital, the return that you're looking is very different than if you're buying a house and 10, 15 years later, you're going to sell it for double. What I do is I'm looking for companies that within 2 to 4 years can sell for 10 times what I put into the company. I have to be able to return that amount of money to my investors. It's a certain type of an asset class. It's not for everybody, but you have to deliver at that sort of a rate. If you're looking at places, therefore, where you can actually put your money, places where everyone else isn't sitting looking at the same opportunities and deals, places where um, there has been ignorance or people ignored over the years, and that there is pent up demand for capital, means that you are able to come in, get better valuations, able to help the organizations more fundamentally and move them through the milestones to eventually get those types of exits so that I can return the capital that my investors are requiring from me. That's why you invest in underrepresented. It's funny to me that everyone is racing after the same person. They're always looking for a white young man who graduated from Cambridge with a PhD in robotics or computer vision. That's like an ideal person for many people to invest in. There are very few of those, and there are a lot of people chasing them. That same person, if they're a Black woman, there are fewer people chasing them. I'm going to invest in the Black woman. She has the same sort of skill set. She's had the same type of experiences. By putting my money behind her, I'm going to be able to get into the deal. I'm going to be able to not get it sort of overvalued, not undervalued, because no one wants to be undervaluing people, but valued appropriately. And then I'm going to be able to move on through the stages to get that company to exit. That's why we do it. And that's why we focus on people of color. It is the best investment strategy because our fiduciary responsibility is to return an extreme amount of capital to the people who invest in us. And that's the way to get it done, by investing in people that are not traditionally invested in.
So you were answering the question of where your faith, how your faith influenced the choices you make or the people you work with in terms of your investment now, and I half cut you off, but I know from the little I've read that you're very serious about your faith. You're very involved at the cathedral.
Mhm.
Certainly, anyone in Bishop Chris's arena definitely is serious about their faith. So
Mhm.
for that reason, I want to see if I can get some gems out of you.
Please.
Uh, so here you are. You're in the cathedral. You're familiar with the church world, but you're also a business titan. If you wanted to recruit people for the church,
Mhm.
what kind of people would you hire and why?
I think in this day and age, it is an excellent question because we are wrestling with this question ourselves. Do you hire people who are good at making tea and sort of making people feel comfortable coming into the church? Do you hire people who are good at sort of being stewards and greeters? I think that in addition to those people, we need to supplement that a little bit. Churches are very expensive entities to maintain if you're going to maintain it at a world-class level. And a place like Suffolk Cathedral that started in 606 AD and has been around forever and has places within the church that are hundreds and hundreds of years old, and it has a high roof and it has lots and lots of people coming and going. There's a lot of financial responsibility that is associated, and their carrying cost of that organization are very high. I try and talk to people who actually then are part of the world of making capital available to underwrite programs. So I want people not only who are grant writers, but people who then think about business models that a church can use that doesn't sort of interrupt its faith, but is able to utilize that in order to fund its activities. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, because I work in the world of digital and technology, I work in a place where esports and gaming is very important. So when I think about sort of who is the audience for Southern Cathedral, Southern Cathedral, although a parish church and then also a cathedral, that's not the only community that Southern can actually address. And we've seen it now during lockdown, and all churches have seen this, that indeed the church that you can actually, in the church community, can be well beyond the borders of your parish. It can be well beyond the borders of your country. It can be well beyond the borders of your region, your hemisphere. And so, what I like to see is then people who have some experience in digital and whose relationship with digital is how do I then get people involved in an immersive experience and make them feel as if they were there, that they don't just get the feeling of that we get in church, and that's the feeling of sort of calm, or the feeling of the Holy Spirit, just because they're in communion with a lot of other people in person, but that we can actually translate that. And that's kind of what's happened in terms of movies. Movies, you don't have to go see a play anymore. You can feel as though you're there. You don't have to feel as though you're in a concert. There are recordings for that. And I think church is another area where what we can do is we can bring some of the technology that's been associated with gaming, sort of these immersive experience of exploration. I think a lot of gaming is all about exploration. What can you find? What are the things that are hidden behind? What are the things that are surprising? And then to be able to use that to get people engaged. And then we say to them, now that you've done the fake thing, now why don't you do the real thing? Come see us at Southern Cathedral one day, and that will transform your life, because it's a qualitatively a different experience, not a better experience, but a very different experience. So I think that those are the kinds of things that I say to people who are in my ecosystem all over, people who are financiers and are investors, as well as people who are in technology. There are all sorts of things for you to do, particularly if you want to be helpful. If you want to help, that's the other thing. So if you want to be in a place where you're not just there in order to be fed, but also to help feed others, then I think that those are the types of things that I would say to those people.
So you've done business all over the world. You've led business all over the world. Uh, what is it and you've lived here for the best part of since 2014, I believe. You've lived in the UK. I mean, you haven't managed to lose your American accent. I mean, come on, mate, come on.
You know, people think it's an affectation if I lost my American accent. Come on, you know.
So now, what for you would you say is unique about the people the people who do business in the areas that you're interested in? You're talking about people of color, women. What makes them any different here in the UK from the people of color and women in America or in Singapore or in Africa? What makes them any different for you? What's the unique thing about them that you appreciate?
So another great question. When I think about entrepreneurs in the UK, and I'm going to use Africans as an example, the thing which I have noted, which is very different from my experience elsewhere, is there's such a bicultural dynamic which exists. And when I say bicultural, here you have a person who's they were from Uganda 6 generations ago, and they live here in the UK, in Manchester, they live in Sussex, wherever they live. When they are starting a company, the very interesting thing that I've noted, and this is almost uniformly among my entrepreneurs, is that they are trying to make solutions to problems, create services and products. They're trying to create marketplaces that actually not only work in the place where they're currently domiciled, so whether they live in Switzerland, whether they live in Sweden, whether they live in Spain, or whether they live in France or the UK, they are attempting to create these sorts of solutions that are going to sort of disrupt and sort of create whole new sort of ways of doing things. But they not only work in Europe, they also work in another economy, and that economy is an African economy. And people are very, very clear about that. That is something I don't see as much in the United States. The United States is its own economy, right? It's the biggest economy in the world. The economy of California is the same size as the economy of the entire UK. So we're talking about lots of states that aggregated are punching at very high weights. So there's not necessarily a reason to look across borders. Here in the UK, when I talk to people in the Netherlands, when I talk to people in Germany, what I hear them saying is, particularly people who are extracted, who are Black, say that whether they're first generation or 15th generation, there's a way in which they're looking at both of those places. And it's so important because in all of the businesses in which I invest, growth is critical. So growth in a small economy like the UK is great, and to be able to dominate that economy is great. But then to say that those 1.3 billion people on the African continent, whatever the country is that I'm thinking about is sort of the country or region I'm thinking about in Africa, that I then can also, I know intimately, and then can take this solution to there, and I have the connections and the sophistication and the cultural understanding to take it from here to there. That's what makes these very exciting and make these entrepreneurs extremely different and unique, and why I am so interested in telling and evangelizing all the time when I talk to my people who are my LPs from the US, and I say, this is why you need to invest in Europe. This is one of the things I constantly talk about, the bicultural dynamics that are associated with Black Caribbeans, Black Africans, British, British Indians, it's just Southeast Asians, the whole groups. I find the same dynamic works, and I can almost say to a person that I found that same dynamic is one that is utilized.
Now, our time is up, and thank you so much for giving me your time. I have two more questions I want to ask you. Of course, we want people to watch the final episode of your show, The Moneymaker, next week, and I'm assuming after it'll be available to be streamed online. I'm assuming.
It's available now. You can see old episodes on all 4 right now.
Okay, on all 4 right now, The Moneymaker. But one question for you then: what initiative have you in your journey here in the UK or maybe abroad as a man of faith? You're doing business, but you're a man of faith, so your sensors will pick up and be able to see some things. What initiatives have you seen of either churches or faith movements that you've thought, this is brilliant, I would put money in this?
There is, so up in right outside of Birmingham, there is a husband and wife team that had been working for a while on a on a accelerator slash incubator, where what they're doing is they are through their church, one of the big churches here in one of the big Pentecostal churches here in the UK, it's all over the country. And they have been working very hard to make sure that they are making available. They invited me to making available capital to entrepreneurs. They invited me to actually speak to their entrepreneur group. They have an entrepreneurial group, which I found fascinating. And they have speakers come in, and I had about 100 people on the call when I did this last year. And since then, I've been working with them in terms of how do they actually stand up their first cohort of people that they're helping to create the right sorts of businesses. It's been phenomenal. And that came out of church. And I really do believe that, although we throw the money lenders and others and tax collectors out of the church, that we do have a role. These are organizations where capital is necessary, and they're capital intensive organizations, particularly if they're outreach programs, and that those outreach programs are so important during COVID and even during ease up, the lives that have been decimated. So it's important that organizations not be starved for capital, and that they be able to do the good work that they have been doing. So I'm very much a believer, from food banks all the way through to scholarship programs. So I
And
think
one
it's very
final
important.
question. It's been said by the experts, it's been said by the layman and the man on the football pitch that we're going into hard times economically. It's a downturn, et cetera, et cetera. What do you see as the church's role in the years to come, with all the difficulties that's been said to be ahead? And what's the church's role in that? And where are the opportunities for the church? I
Mhm.
guess it's still the same thing. What's the church's role in the
I
years
think
to come?
so. For me, there are two things that I think are very important roles for the church. I think, first of all, the church sets a tone. One of the things about the moneymaker and me is that I wanted to set a tone that sort of is my Christian values. You'll see I'm not a screamer and a yeller. I don't try and degrade people. That's just not how that's not how I think about other humans. And I think that when we take a church approach, or a church sort of a set of teachings about loving thy neighbor and not stealing and doing good and trying to make the world a better place, those, when translated into business, and you see it more and more in terms of things like ESG, you'll hear people talking about ESG, those sorts of bigger and more macro approaches and mindsets being brought into business, I think it's very, very important. And people who do have faith, when I first came to the UK, I came to work for two young men who met in church. So SwiftKey was started by two young men who met in church. They both went to Cambridge University, but they met in church, and they said there's a thing that we can do together. And they then built an organization and sold it for 250 million to Microsoft. There are things that can come out of church. It's a great convening place. You assume, and I think we can pretty much assume, people have the same sort of moral and mental compass, and that that's a great thing. And then I do think that the other thing that churches can do is that churches can incubate ideas and creativity, because it has space and it has time to talk about other sorts of things in addition to everything that happens in the homily or in the sermon or in the scripture readings. That there is an opportunity also to incubate the next generation of what do we think is important for you to know, what do we think it's important for you to follow in your journey to adulthood, in your journey to entrepreneurship, in your journey to wealth, that's associated with something that is actually a stewardship approach. Because quite frankly, we are stewards of what we receive, and the stewardship is supposed to then pay off for society. We are not stewards just for ourselves, but we're stewards for a bigger society, the church, the parish, the world.
It's interesting what you say about these young men meeting in church, and that, because I've seen an interview of you where you said actually going to Princeton, going to Harvard, it wasn't the books, it wasn't the academia necessarily, it was the networks that it afforded you. So connected to a Kathy Hughes, connected to a Barack Obama, and it was quite funny when you said in the interview, well, Barack Obama just didn't wake up and think, Eric Collins, come and join. We knew each other. so, so for you, uh, I mean, for some people, they may not truly appreciate the opportunity to network in church, but for you, you see that as
I see it as and my purpose is not to hand out my business card. That's not what I'm doing in church. But what I'm doing is I'm asking questions and listening to other people's stories. And I'm trying to say, what could I possibly do for you? There's one young woman, a person named Jasmine Palmer, who's in our church, a talented young woman who's been working on vaccination and been working on clinical trials associated with everything from heart disease and more recently to COVID. She is a brilliant, a young Black woman who is a lawyer by training, and she's moved into the academic world in order to do these studies on behalf of the NHS and others. And so I had to know that by sort of speaking to her as to what she was doing. And so I talked to her all the time. And I introduced her to one of my people, who's one of my investors, Lenny Henry. So that because she said that what we need to do, Eric, is we need to have more Black people in clinical trials. We need to have more Black people getting inoculated. Let me talk to Lenny Henry because she thinks that that's something that would be helpful. And then bringing that community of church with the community of investors, and then great things happen. So it's been, for me, I think that that's been very important. But again, it hasn't been that I've been passing on my business cards. What can you do for me? But my questions are there things that I can help you to do? And that's where I think that's, at least for me, always been the focus of my parents, always been the focus of my brother and sister who grew up in their families, and then me and my family. That's how we think in terms of how we network through church.
Eric Collins, founder of Impact Tech Capital Partners and presenter of The Moneymaker on Channel 4. Thank you so much for speaking to us. One final thing for someone who wants to watch your show on Channel 4. I know you've said we can stream it online. They want to watch it next week, the finale. What time is it on?
10 p.m. And the company called Trinit, which is a mobile barbering service, is on. And Darren Tangerang is the guy who is actually the British Ghana-derived entrepreneur who is so talented. So you should watch next week to see what Darren has to go through in his journey.
Oh, thank you so much.
Premier Gospel.